The most dangerous ideas in a society are not the ones being argued, but the ones being assumed. Man, that quote by G.K. Chesterton really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Have you ever stopped to actually wonder where your deepest values and worldviews come from? Like, are they really yours, or were they just kind of handed to you by invisible, unexamined cultural currents? Today, we're going to do some conceptual mapping. We're breaking down a very specific and highly provocative analysis of modern Western culture to see exactly how these assumed ideas might literally be shaping our reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking the framework laid out in Harm Timmerman's book, Culture of Delusion. We're going to impartially map out Timmerman's cultural analysis just to see how he constructs his argument. Basically, he claims that our society is operating under a dominant, completely invisible ideology that is fundamentally rewiring how we live, how we think, and how we interact with one another. Now, we aren't here to take a side or endorse these controversial viewpoints. We are simply here to decode the author's philosophical lens so you can understand the exact mechanics of the argument he's making.
So, here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The core thesis. 2. Two competing worldviews. 3. Symptoms of modern delusion. 4. The mechanics of ideology. And finally, number 5, the Eye of Horus.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the core thesis, the water we swim in.
Timmerman introduces this really fascinating problem. He says ideology is to humans what water is to a fish. It's everywhere, right? It dictates our movements, yet we completely take it for granted. We almost never realize it's a constructed environment. His overarching premise is that our cultural foundation has been systematically inverted. Yeah, literally turned upside down. According to his analysis, ever since the French Revolution, the original bedrock of Western civilization has been slowly and methodically replaced. So what we consider normal water today, he claims it's actually a complete, upside-down inversion of the civilization that came before it.
Moving on to Section 2, two competing worldviews, the paradigm shift. To really grasp this inversion, we have to look at this stark dichotomy Timmerman sets up. On one side, we have the original foundation of Western civilization. He identifies this as being rooted in Greco-Judeo-Christian thought, backed up by a Protestant Calvinist work ethic and way of life. But on the other side, we have what has replaced it, the Romantic-Marxist worldview. Timmerman argues that literally every single dimension of that original tradition, whether it's our attitudes toward work, relationships, authority, or morality, has an exact direct opposite in this new culture. And he argues this new ideology is incredibly seductive. Why? Because it appeals directly to our immediate feelings and self-interest. It basically offers a free pass from the shared morality, the discipline, and the self-mastery that the old worldview strictly demanded, and replaces all of that duty with a relentless pursuit of personal emancipation.
Which brings us to Section 3, Symptoms of Modern Delusion, recognizing the patterns.
So how does this massive shift actually show up in our daily lives? Well, Timmerman splits this dominant culture into two very distinct observable branches, the Romantic order and the Marxist order. And he makes a great point here. You don't need to read heavy academic texts by Rousseau or Marx to be infected by their philosophies. They are just the new cultural air we breathe, popping up constantly in our everyday behaviors and societal norms.
Let's break down the Romantic order first. Take the eternal youth, for example. It's kind of fascinating how he frames this. A society that reveres a 16-year-old skipping school for climate protests, while at the same time telling adults to endlessly embrace their inner child instead of just growing up and taking on responsible adulthood. He also points to a glorification of nature, where any sober discussion about climate uncertainties is instantly treated like absolute heresy, treating the natural world almost like sacred ground. Then there's the spiritual supermarket. Traditional community churches are emptying out, right? And they're being replaced by this highly individualized mix of yoga, healing crystals, esoteric shops. He also highlights the normalized high, suggesting that designer drugs and a narco-state economy are now just casually justified under the banner of personal freedom. And finally, music everywhere. He describes a modern landscape where massive music festivals have essentially become our new cathedrals, stepping in to fill a profound void of genuine community.
Now, flipping over to the Marxist order, Timmerman spots a totally different set of symptoms, but they are all intricately tied to a systemic aversion to hierarchy and authority. We start with the glorification of the oppressed. This is where certain demographic groups are reflexively framed as noble victims, totally regardless of their individual circumstances. Then we see the collapse of authority, which he argues is super visible in classrooms where teachers basically have lost their mandate to discipline, or in public spaces where police face hostility without any real consequences. He brings up religion again, too, coupling those empty Western churches with the global persecution of Christians, a phenomenon he claims the ideological filters of Western media deliberately ignore. And finally, there's the disqualified man. Timmerman points out that boys and men are vastly overrepresented in alarming statistics, like school dropout rates, homelessness, and suicides. Yet the public debate is almost entirely obsessed with dismantling toxic masculinity. In his view, these aren't just isolated issues. They are coordinated symptoms of a society running on a completely inverted ideological reflex.
Okay, Section 4. The mechanics of ideology. How the narrative spread.
This raises a huge question. If this cultural shift is so fundamental, how on earth did it overtake society without most of us even noticing? Well, it all comes down to how Timmerman defines the word delusion. He's not using this as a clinical psychiatric diagnosis for a single person. He's using it as a sweeping cultural diagnosis for an entire society. According to the text, a delusion is a condition where widely held beliefs are demonstrably at odds with reality, but, and here is the kicker, they fiercely resist any correction by empirical evidence. When a society is handed cold, hard facts that directly contradict its favorite ideology, instead of changing its beliefs to match the truth, it just reinterprets the facts to resolve that uncomfortable cognitive dissonance.
To explain exactly how this mass delusion spreads, the author borrows this brilliant concept from evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, the idea of memes. And no, we are not talking about funny internet pictures here. In this context, memes are the cultural equivalent of biological genes. Ideas, values, norms. They behave exactly like viruses. They spread, they mutate, and they replicate rapidly through imitation. An entire ideology, like the Romantic-Marxist worldview, acts as a memeplex. That's a tightly bound bundle of ideas working together to ensure their own survival. Because these specific ideas appeal so strongly to our base instincts, our deep longing for unchecked personal freedom, and our urge to blame some external system for our own unhappiness, they become incredibly powerful, self-replicating cultural viruses.
So how does this ideological virus actually get distributed to the masses? Timmerman outlines a three-step cultural takeover. First, he leans on a well-known Marxist axiom. Institutions, specifically the media, the education system, the arts, and politics, capture and control the primary channels of communication. Second, through these captured channels, ideological narratives are just continuously, seamlessly pumped out by cultural role models, influencers, and authority figures. And finally, step 3, this relentless top-down messaging causes everyday individuals to develop what he calls a false consciousness. People go about their lives genuinely thinking they're free thinkers making independent moral choices, when in reality, they're just running the software, the pre-written ideological script that was handed to them by the dominant culture.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the Eye of Horus, seeing clearly.
To offer an antidote to this condition, Timmerman draws on the ancient Egyptian myth of Osiris, Seth, and Horus. In the story, the falcon god Horus goes to war against the forces of decay, deception, and confusion. He's defined by the Eye of Horus, this powerful symbol representing clear vision, penetrating insight, and the unique ability to see the truth that remains hidden from everyone else. During his epic battle, Horus actually loses his eye, but he fights relentlessly to win it back. And with that restored vision, he is able to restore order to the world. The author's ultimate call to action here is for readers to become like Horus. He wants us to develop that penetrating insight so we can actively decode these institutional narratives, see right through the delusion, and begin the hard work of restoring cultural balance.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to take away from this explainer. If culture truly is the invisible water we swim in, and our major institutions are the filters controlling what flows through it, we really have to stop and ask ourselves, what is the quality of the water you are swimming in? Are the narratives you accept as absolute, unquestionable truth actually grounded in objective reality, or are they just unexamined assumptions handed down by a culture of delusion? It is such a fascinating lens through which to view our modern world, and it absolutely invites some deep reflection on our own hidden biases. Thank you so much for joining me as we mapped out this framework. Keep questioning the assumed, and I'll see you in the next explainer.